They started like whispers, dull, pulsing aches behind my eyes. At first, I blamed the usual suspects: stress, too much time staring at my laptop screen, or maybe the weight of everything I'd been carrying since Celeste's promotion. It was easier to assume that life was wearing me down than to think something might actually be wrong. My name is Malcolm Reyes, and I've never been the type to complain. I was the husband who picked up the slack, the man who made sure dinner was on the table when Celeste worked late nights at the biotech lab, the one who smiled through fatigue and told everyone I was fine. I'd left my own career behind, marketing manager at a mid-sized firm, so Celeste could chase her ambitions. I always said it was a partnership, a trade, but sometimes it felt more like a sacrifice. She was the star. I was the support act. And when those headaches began creeping in, I told myself I didn't have the right to make a fuss. At first, they were easy enough to dismiss. A flash of discomfort when the day dragged too long or when the glare from the screen refused to fade. I'd rub my temples, close my eyes, take a deep breath, and remind myself it was nothing. Everyone gets headaches. Everyone carries stress. I thought if I just powered through, they'd go away on their own. That's what I always did with pain, tucked it away in a box labeled, to be dealt with later, then buried it under all the other things that demanded my attention. After all, Celeste's work was demanding enough, and she needed me to hold things together at home. She'd been pulling late nights, back-to-back meetings with investors, traveling to conferences in cities I'd only seen on Instagram. I'd grown used to the sound of her voice through a speakerphone instead of across the table. I'd grown used to waiting, always waiting. But something shifted this time. The pain wasn't just an echo anymore. It was thunder. A low, unrelenting pressure that made my vision blur and my knees buckle. I'd be mid-sentence and lose my train of thought. Sometimes, I'd forget why I'd walked into a room. I started avoiding conversations because I didn't trust my memory. I'd lie awake at night, counting the seconds between the throbbing pulses behind my eyes, too afraid to move. My nights became restless, filled with the soft hiss of the humidifier Celeste had insisted on buying. She never noticed the way I flinched at every pulse, the way I pressed my fingertips to my temples as if trying to squeeze the pain out. She'd come home, kick off her shoes, pour herself a glass of wine, and complain about the day's lab results. I'd smile, ask the right questions, and hide the tremor in my hands. One night, after Celeste had fallen asleep with her phone still buzzing on the nightstand, I sat at the edge of our bed, staring at the glow from the screen. Her calendar was filled with meetings, some labeled confidential, others marked private. I scrolled through them, hoping to find a gap, a space where we could talk, where she could see me as more than just the man who folded the laundry. But all I saw were obligations, conferences, board meetings, dinner parties. Her world was moving too fast, and I couldn't keep up. The ache behind my eyes felt like a warning, a signal I couldn't decode. I closed her phone and pressed my palms to my face, willing the pain to fade. It didn't. The next morning, I stood at the bathroom sink, staring at my reflection. My face looked older than I remembered, lines etched across my forehead like tiny scars. I'd always been proud of the way I held it together, the way I smiled even when everything hurt. But that day, even my smile felt brittle. The pain behind my eyes spiked as I tried to shave, the razor trembling in my hand. I nicked myself and watched the blood bead up, bright and accusing. That's when the thought came, maybe this wasn't just stress. Maybe I needed help. Maybe, just maybe. I had to put myself first, even if only for a moment. I made the appointment on a Tuesday afternoon, while Celeste was on a conference call in the other room. I didn't tell her. I didn't want to worry her, or maybe I didn't want to give her a chance to dismiss it as another one of my overreactions. I'd heard that word before, overreaction, usually when I asked for a little time, a little understanding. So I called Dr. Suresh's office and scheduled the earliest available slot. Just to be safe, I told myself. Just to stop the ringing in my skull. My voice sounded small in my own ears, like I was talking to someone else's husband, someone else's life. The day of the appointment, the sky was overcast. June humidity clung to my skin like a second shirt. I pulled into the medical center parking lot and sat in the car for a full 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel. I thought about calling Celeste, but then I pictured her at her desk, head bent over some complicated spreadsheet, phone cradled between her shoulder and her ear as she negotiated with vendors. I didn't want to be another problem on her list. So I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked into the clinic. The receptionist smiled politely as I signed in. "Mr. Reyes," she said. "We'll call you in shortly." I nodded, my heart pounding like a trapped bird in my chest. The waiting room smelled like bleach and old magazines. I found a seat in the corner, away from the other patients, and focused on the clock ticking above the door. The pain behind my eyes felt like a living thing, growing stronger with each passing second. I rubbed my temples and reminded myself to breathe. One breath in, one breath out. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until a nurse called my name. She led me through a maze of hallways, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering like nervous laughter. My mind felt foggy, my steps unsure. Every noise seemed amplified, the squeak of her shoes, the rustle of papers, the distant beeping of medical equipment. "Right this way, Mr. Reyes," she said, guiding me into a small exam room. "Dr. Suresh will be with you shortly." I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. As I sat there, staring at the white walls, the pain intensified. It was no longer just a headache, it was a drumbeat of panic. I thought about all the times I'd dismissed it, all the times I'd said, "I'm fine," even when I wasn't. The door opened, and Dr. Suresh walked in, his face calm and professional. He asked me questions. When did the pain start? How often did it happen? Any other symptoms? I tried to answer, but the words felt like pebbles in my mouth, dry and misshapen. He nodded, took notes, and ordered an MRI. "Just to be sure," he said. I wanted to laugh, just to be sure. But I didn't. I just nodded and let him guide me through the paperwork. I walked out of the clinic that day feeling like I'd finally acknowledged something I'd been running from for too long. The pain was still there, but now it had a name, something that needed to be faced, not hidden. As I drove home, I thought about Celeste and how I would tell her. I thought about the life we'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, the things I'd given up. I thought about the ache I'd tried to ignore and how it was no longer something I could push aside. It was here, in the center of my life, demanding to be seen. It was a Thursday morning when I walked into Lakeview Medical Center, the air cold and sharp as a slap to the face. The hall smelled like antiseptic and tension, like too many people carrying too many worries. I checked in at the front desk, barely glancing at the magazines with their glossy covers promising health and happiness. I was too busy listening to the way my heart tripped over itself in my chest. I kept reminding myself, this is routine. Just a scan. Just to be safe. But the ache behind my eyes wasn't routine anymore. It felt like a clock ticking down to something I didn't want to name. The MRI technician, Linda Zhao, met me with a calm smile and a clipboard. "Mr. Reyes? We'll take good care of you today," she said, her voice warm but practiced. She was in her early 30s, hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, eyes as sharp as the smell of the hallway. She guided me to the changing area, handed me a gown, and instructed me to remove any metal. I undressed slowly, my fingers fumbling with the buttons on my shirt. I thought about the wedding ring I'd left at home. Celeste had insisted it might interfere with the scan. I couldn't remember why I'd agreed to that. Maybe it was easier to go along than to ask questions. Linda led me down a narrow hallway, past a bank of computers and a small break room where two nurses laughed quietly over styrofoam cups. I tried to catch their laughter like a lifeline, something to remind me that the world was still normal, but it felt forced. I'd grown too used to my own silence. "Here we are," Linda said, opening a heavy door. The MRI room looked like a futuristic chamber, cold and humming with invisible power. The machine loomed like a sleeping beast, its white, rounded shell waiting to swallow me whole. "It's going to be loud," Linda said, strapping my head gently into place. "But you'll be okay. Just keep still. We'll be on the other side of the window." She smiled again, professional, but with a softness that made me feel like she might actually care. I thanked her, my voice a whisper that didn't sound like my own. As she left the room, I stared at the ceiling, painted with pale clouds and a slice of blue sky. They tried to make it comforting, but all I saw was a lie. The machine whirred to life, and the noise filled every corner of my skull. A rhythmic pounding, like the echo of my own pulse amplified 1,000 times. I closed my eyes and tried to count the beats, focusing on my breath, on the way my chest rose and fell. I thought about Celeste, about the way her voice used to lift at the end of a sentence, full of questions and excitement. Now, it always fell flat, clipped and cold. I wondered if she'd even notice if something happened to me. I wondered if she'd be in this room, waiting for me to come out. But then mid-cycle, the machine stopped. Not gradually, not with the sigh of a machine winding down, but abruptly. A silence so deep it roared in my ears. I opened my eyes, confused, and tried to peer through the small window that separated me from the rest of the world. I could just make out Linda's shape, her hands pressed to her headset, her lips moving fast, too fast for me to understand. My pulse spiked. Something wasn't right. I strained to hear, but the glass and the hum of electronics made it impossible. Then a voice, male, unfamiliar, broke through the barrier. Calm but uneasy, a practiced tone that didn't quite mask the fear underneath. "What is this doing here?" he said. I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. "Where's his wife?" Another voice, female, soft but urgent. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to move, to get up and demand answers, but the straps held me in place. Every second felt like a century. The door opened suddenly, flooding the room with too bright light. Linda stepped inside, her smile gone, replaced by a tightness around her eyes. She unstrapped my head with hands that trembled just slightly. "Mr. Reyes," she said, her voice carefully calm. "We're going to take you to a consultation room. Dr. Suresh wants to discuss your scan results." Her words felt rehearsed, like she'd said them before, but never to me. I tried to swallow the panic rising in my throat. "Did you find something?" I asked. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I needed the truth. She hesitated, eyes darting to the machine as if it might answer for her. "The doctor will explain everything," she said finally. She helped me off the table, her grip steady despite the tremor I could see in her hands. As I stood, the pain behind my eyes flared like a warning siren, and for a moment, the room tilted sideways. I grabbed her arm, steadying myself. "Please," I whispered, "just tell me. Am I dying?" My voice sounded small, broken, like a child asking for the light to be left on. She squeezed my arm, her eyes softening just for a second. "No, Mr. Reyes," she said. "It's not that. But you deserve to hear it from the doctor." I nodded, feeling the words sink into me like stones. "Not that. But then what?" My mind raced with possibilities. A tumor? A blood clot? Something that couldn't be fixed? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a darkness I couldn't name. She led me down the hallway, past the same break room where the nurses had stopped laughing. They watched me now, their eyes wide, their conversations forgotten. I wondered if they'd seen my scan. I wondered if they were pitying me, or if they were just glad it wasn't them. The ache behind my eyes pulsed in time with my heartbeat, each throb a question I couldn't answer. We reached the consultation room, a small, sterile box with a single chair and a screen that glowed faintly blue. Linda gestured for me to sit, then left without another word. The silence closed in around me, thick and heavy. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I pressed my fingertips to my temples, trying to will the pain away. It didn't work. It never did. The door opened, and Dr. Suresh walked in, his white coat crisp and his face carefully arranged into a mask of calm. He sat across from me, his eyes meeting mine with a gravity that made my chest tighten. "Mr. Reyes," he began, his voice measured, "we've reviewed your MRI results." He paused, as if choosing his next words with surgical precision. "There's something we need to discuss." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as paper. "What is it?" I managed. He turned the screen toward me, the image grainy but clear enough for me to see something small, something foreign, embedded deep near my right jawbone. I stared at it, my mind refusing to make sense of what I was seeing. "Mr. Reyes," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "have you had any implants, surgeries, or dental procedures in the past few years?" My mouth went dry. "Just wisdom teeth," I said. "Maybe 3 years ago." He nodded, tapping the screen. "Was that at a regular dentist?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "No. It was through my wife's friend. A guy named Dr. Hayden Krill, oral surgeon." "Why?" Dr. Suresh adjusted his glasses, his eyes flickering to the scan. "That's not dental material," he said, his voice low. "That's a microelectronic component. Something meant to transmit." The room seemed to spin, the air turning to ice. "Transmit what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He met my eyes with a look that felt like the end of the world. "Location. Possibly audio. Mr. Reyes, someone has been monitoring you." I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling every part of my life shatter at once. Celeste's face flashed in my mind. Her smile, her late nights, her phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The headaches, the confusion, the sense that something was always just beyond my reach. It all made sense now. My wife, my partner, had turned me into a surveillance target. And as I sat there, the ache behind my eyes wasn't just pain anymore. It was betrayal. It was the sound of my life falling apart. And it had started in the MRI room. They brought me out of that MRI room with hands that were too gentle, like they were afraid I'd shatter. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My mind felt like it had been split open, every thought unraveling into 100 questions. As they led me through the corridor, I caught reflections of myself in the glass. Wide-eyed, pale, the same man who'd once smiled through every hard day, now unmoored and uncertain. They guided me into a consultation room that felt too small, too bright. A place for bad news, I thought. A place where everything you think you know crumbles. Dr. Suresh was already there, his expression taut. He'd been the steady hand before, the voice of reason, but now he couldn't even look me in the eyes. He gestured for me to sit, and I sank into the chair like a man who'd forgotten how to stand. I tried to find my voice, but it stuck in my throat, thick as mud. Doctor, I managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. What's going on? He let out a slow breath, eyes flickering toward the screen beside him, an image frozen in time. My scan. The thing lodged deep near my right jawbone. It felt like staring at a crime scene, a piece of evidence that had no place inside me. Mr. Reyes, he began, his voice steady but tinged with something I couldn't name. Pity, maybe, or fear. We found a foreign object in your scan. It's not consistent with any known dental materials. He paused, adjusting his glasses like they'd suddenly become too heavy. It's a microelectronic component. I blinked, the words sounding like they came from a world I didn't recognize. A component, I said, my voice shaking. Like a computer chip? He nodded, his lips pressed together in a grim line. Yes, a device designed to transmit signals. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the sorrow in his eyes. Have you had any surgeries, implants, or dental procedures in the last few years? My mind raced. Surgeries? No. Implants? No. Dental work? Yes. I remembered the wisdom teeth, the pain that had flared up like a firecracker at the back of my jaw. My wisdom teeth, I said slowly, my heart thudding. 3 years ago. A dentist? No, an oral surgeon. Hayden Krill. He was a friend of my wife's. Dr. Suresh leaned back slightly, his brow furrowed. Was this at a reputable dental clinic? He asked. His voice was careful, measured. I shook my head, a memory surfacing of a small office above a dry cleaner's, the faint smell of chemicals, Hayden's too easy smile. It was at his private practice, I said. Celeste recommended him. She even filled out the paperwork. Said he'd give us a discount. My voice cracked at the edges. Why? What does this have to do with anything? He turned the screen toward me, and I saw the object again, magnified and glowing in the blue-tinted image. Mr. Reyes, this isn't just any device, he said. It's designed to be powered by your body heat. A semi-permanent implant. It has a GPS locator, and possibly a microphone. It's a tracking and surveillance device. The world stopped. My breath caught in my throat, a gasp that never found air. You're saying I've been bugged? Like an animal? His gaze softened, but he didn't flinch. That's exactly what I'm saying, he said. Whoever did this to you wanted to know where you were, and maybe what you were saying. It's sophisticated technology, not something you'd find on the street. A cold shiver slid down my spine, each vertebra stiffening. My thoughts tumbled in every direction. Celeste's late nights, the hush of her voice when I entered the room, the way she'd insisted on that particular surgeon. A betrayal so deep it made my teeth ache. My stomach turned, while rising at the back of my throat. My wife, I whispered, the words tasting like poison. She set this up. Dr. Suresh hesitated. It's a possibility we can't ignore, he said carefully, especially since it coincides with the timeline you described. My head fell into my hands. I tried to remember every moment, every dinner, every casual laugh, every time she touched my cheek and told me she loved me. Had it all been a lie? Had she watched me every time I left the house, every time I talked to my sister or called a friend? Every moment of doubt, every private thought, I felt them all crashing down like broken glass. How long? I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head. Hard to say. But given the device's sophistication, it's likely been active since it was implanted. Years, perhaps. A sob built in my chest, raw and heavy, but I swallowed it down. I wouldn't cry. Not here, not now. I'd already given away enough of myself. My fingers dug into the armrests, white-knuckled. What do I do now? I asked. How do I get it out? Dr. Suresh leaned forward, his tone shifting to something more clinical, a balm against the panic rising inside me. We can schedule a minor surgery, he said. I'll perform it myself. It's a delicate procedure, but we can remove the device without significant risk. I nodded, my head feeling too heavy to hold up. Surgery. Another price to pay for love, if you could even call it that anymore. And the police? I asked. Should I report this? He gave me a steady look. Absolutely, he said. I've already notified the hospital's legal team. They'll help you file the necessary reports. This is a serious invasion of privacy and possibly a crime. I stared at him, the room blurring around the edges. She did this to me, I whispered. My own wife. He reached across the desk and laid a hand on mine, his touch firm but gentle. I'm sorry, Mr. Reyes, he said. No one deserves this. The door opened then, and a nurse stepped in with a clipboard, her eyes darting between us. Doctor, the detectives are here, she said quietly. Detectives. Of course. This was bigger than just me and Celeste now. I felt like I was being pulled underwater, every breath an act of will. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady beneath me. Let them in, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded and disappeared. I took a deep breath, trying to gather the pieces of myself that had shattered in that room. My entire life had been dissected. My love, my trust, my marriage, all of it laid bare under the cold light of an MRI scan. And now the law would step in. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing. The ache behind my eyes was no longer just physical. It was a wound she'd left in me. And no matter how clean the surgical cut, no matter how precise Dr. Suresh's hands were, I wasn't sure that wound would ever fully heal. Back home, I didn't say anything to Celeste, not at first. I couldn't bring myself to look at her the same way I used to. She was standing by the kitchen island, pouring a glass of wine, the rich red liquid catching the overhead lights like blood. She glanced up at me and smiled, a small, practiced smile that used to mean comfort. Now it felt like a mask. How was the scan? She asked, her tone light. She was always so casual when she wanted to steer the conversation away from anything uncomfortable. It was fine, I lied, my voice flat. Just some tension headaches. The words tasted bitter, like I'd bitten down on a lie and felt it break apart on my tongue. She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and turned back to her wine, humming a tune under her breath. I watched her for a moment, her hair pulled back in that tight bun she always wore after work, her phone buzzing on the counter every few minutes. How many of those messages were about me? How many calls had she taken in secret? That night, I lay in bed beside her, the darkness pressing in around me like a second skin. I could hear her breathing, slow and even, like the beat of a metronome. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything. The GPS device, the microphone, Dr. Suresh's voice telling me someone had been monitoring me. And then his question, was this at a regular dentist? I thought about Hayden Krill, her friend, the one she'd insisted I see. He's the best, she'd said. Trust me. Trust me. The phrase rang in my head like a warning bell. I thought about the way she'd handled the insurance paperwork, the way she'd smiled when I'd told her the headaches had started. She'd kissed my forehead and told me I was just tired. And I believed her. God, I believed every word. I turned onto my side, watching the glow of her phone screen as it lit up every time a message came in. I wondered how many of those messages were from Krill or from someone else helping her keep tabs on me. I thought about the first time she'd been working late, how I'd cooked dinner and waited, telling myself she was busy changing the world. I convinced myself it was noble, that supporting her dreams meant sacrificing some of my own. But now, lying there, I realized I'd been supporting a stranger. The next morning, I watched her get ready for work. She moved around the bedroom like it was a stage, her movements precise, practiced. Her makeup was perfect, her smile rehearsed. She glanced at me in the mirror, her eyes soft but distant. You look tired, she said, brushing a stray hair from my forehead. Did you sleep? Not much, I said, my voice tight. I wondered if she could hear the accusation in it. She paused, her hand lingering on my shoulder. You should rest, she said, her tone as sweet as poison. You've been carrying a lot lately. She kissed my cheek, then turned and grabbed her bag, heading for the door. Love you, she called over her shoulder, like it was something automatic, like she'd practiced it too many times. Love you, I murmured back, the words sticking in my throat. After she left, I stood in the middle of the bedroom, the silence wrapping around me like a straitjacket. I could still smell her perfume in the air, sharp and floral, a scent that used to comfort me but now felt like a trap. I walked to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, the ache behind them worse than ever. I pressed my fingertips to my jaw, feeling the phantom weight of that device. The thing she'd put there, or at least approved of. I thought about calling my sister, Raina. She'd always been the one to sense when something was wrong. But what would I even say? My wife put a tracker in my head. It sounded insane, even to me. But the evidence was there, in the scan, in the way the pain had started after that dental appointment, in the way Celeste had distanced herself from me over the past 3 years, the way she'd always had an answer for everything, a plan for every moment. I spent the day pacing the apartment, waiting for her to text, to call, to come home. I thought about confronting her, about standing in front of her and demanding the truth. But every time I pictured her face, I felt my resolve slip. She was too good at this, too practiced. She'd have an answer, a deflection, a way to make me doubt myself. She'd probably cry. God, she was good at that too. Tears always came easy to her when she wanted them. That evening, she came home carrying takeout, our favorite Thai place, the one she always ordered from when she wanted to make things seem normal. I thought we could have dinner together, she said, her smile bright, but her eyes too sharp. Sure, I said, forcing a smile of my own. I sat at the table, watching her unpack the containers, the way her hands moved, efficient and precise. Like everything she did. We ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clinking of chopsticks and the occasional hum of the fridge. Did Dr. Suresh say when you get your results? She asked, her voice casual, too casual. Soon, I lied, staring at the curry but not tasting it. He said it's probably nothing. She nodded, relief flashing across her face so quickly I almost missed it. That's good, she said. I was worried. I almost laughed. Worried. That was a good one. I wanted to ask her what she was worried about me, or the possibility that her secret might come to light. But I didn't. I couldn't, not yet. I needed more. More evidence. More answers. More strength. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing down on me like a weight. I thought about the way she'd suggested that dentist, the way she'd handled the insurance, the way she'd insisted I see him alone. I thought about the headaches that started after that, the way I'd shrugged them off. I thought about every late night she'd spend at work, every phone call that ended when I entered the room. And I realized that what was growing inside me wasn't just pain. It was a secret she'd planted, nurtured, and watched grow like a vine wrapped around my life. And every beat of my heart felt like betrayal. I turned onto my side, staring at her sleeping form, her hair fanned across the pillow, her face serene. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. But I knew better now. I knew that the woman I'd trusted with my life had stolen my privacy, my thoughts, my very sense of self. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought kept echoing in my mind. How do you fight someone who knows your every move before you make it? How do you trust someone who's been listening to your thoughts through a device you never even knew was there? I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew one thing. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd aged a decade overnight. The headache was still there, a dull roar that pulsed behind my temples with every beat of my heart. I tried to stretch, but my body felt stiff, as though the betrayal that had started as a whisper in the back of my mind had burrowed itself into my bones. I could hear Celeste in the kitchen, the rhythmic clinking of dishes and the hiss of the espresso machine. The smell of coffee drifted through the apartment, mingling with the scent of her perfume, sharp, familiar, and now unbearable. I couldn't look at her without seeing that device lodged near my jaw, the silent witness she'd planted inside me. I dressed quietly, each movement deliberate, as if I could convince myself that today was just another day. But it wasn't. I picked up the business card Dr. Suresh had given me the day before. It bore the name of a detective, Margot Lynn, and a direct line. I held it between my fingers, the weight of the paper heavier than I expected. I'd never imagined I'd need to call the police on my own wife. The thought alone made me feel like a traitor, but then I remembered the coldness in Celeste's eyes when she asked about my MRI results, the way relief had flashed across her face too quickly. I slipped the card into my pocket and left the apartment without a word. Celeste didn't ask where I was going. She was too busy typing away on her phone, her eyes fixed on the screen. Maybe she thought she already knew. Maybe she thought the device still held me like a puppet on a string. But it didn't. Not anymore. Lakeview Medical Center felt different today. The halls were still the same antiseptic white, the same quiet hum of machines, but my footsteps felt heavier, like they echoed with every betrayal that had brought me here. I found the office Dr. Suresh had directed me to Special Investigations, a small, nondescript door halfway down the main hallway. I knocked once and pushed it open. Detective Margot Lynn was waiting for me, a short woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense air. She wore a black blazer over a simple blouse, her badge clipped to her belt. She gestured for me to sit and offered a small, practiced smile. "Mr. Reyes," she said, "I'm Detective Lynn. Dr. Suresh briefed me on your case. I'd like you to tell me everything in your own words." I sat down heavily, my hands trembling slightly as I folded them in my lap. I took a deep breath and began. I told her about the headaches, about Celeste's suggestion to see Dr. Hayden Krill, about the surgery that had seemed so routine at the time. I told her about the way the pain had started after that, the way I'd started losing track of time, feeling like someone was always watching. I told her about Celeste's long nights at the lab, her phone calls that always ended when I entered the room. I told her about the MRI, about Dr. Suresh's voice when he said, "That's not dental material." Detective Lynn listened without interrupting, her pen scratching across a yellow notepad with quiet efficiency. When I finally fell silent, the words spent, she looked up at me, her eyes steady. "Mr. Reyes," she said, "what you're describing is highly unusual, but unfortunately, it's not impossible. We've seen cases of unauthorized surveillance before, though usually not this sophisticated." I swallowed hard. Who would even do something like this? I asked. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands together. "Well," she said, "you mentioned your wife was the one who arranged the dental procedure. Did she ever give you a reason why she wanted you to see Dr. Krill instead of a regular dentist?" I thought back to that day, Celeste's bright smile, her insistence that Krill was a friend, that he'd give us a discount. "She said he'd do a better job," I said, my voice hollow. "That he was an expert." Detective Lynn nodded slowly. "And how has your relationship been over the last 3 years?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Strained," I said. "She's been distant, working long hours, distracted. Sometimes I'd talk and she wouldn't even look up from her phone." My voice cracked. I thought it was just the stress from her job. She tapped her pen against the notepad. "Mr. Reyes, I'm going to ask you something difficult," she said. "Did you ever suspect your wife of infidelity?" The question hit me like a punch. I sat there, staring at her, feeling the weight of every time Celeste had been late, every time she brushed me off with a smile and a promise of tomorrow. I didn't want to," I said finally. "But yes, I guess I did." Detective Lynn nodded again. "It's possible," she said gently, "that your wife, if she was having an affair, wanted to keep tabs on you, to make sure you didn't suspect anything. That device was sophisticated enough to pick up GPS data, audio, maybe even conversations you thought were private." My stomach turned. Every private word with my sister, every late-night confession to friends, every argument, every doubt, recorded. It was like someone had taken a scalpel and cut away my privacy, piece by piece. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She leaned forward. "We'll need to secure a warrant to search your home," she said, "to check for any other devices, computers, phones, cloud accounts. We'll also investigate Dr. Krill. If he was complicit in this, he's facing serious charges." My mouth went dry. "And Celeste?" I asked. "What about her?" Detective Lynn's eyes were steady, but there was a sadness there too. "If she was involved," she said, "she'll be charged. Illegal surveillance, medical tampering, emotional abuse, it's a serious crime. You'd be the victim in this case, Mr. Reyes, and she'd be the perpetrator." I felt something inside me break. The woman I'd shared my life with, the woman I loved and trusted, was now a suspect in a crime against me. It was too much. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to force back the tears. Detective Lynn didn't say anything. She just let me sit there, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. When I finally looked up, she handed me a small tissue box. "You're not alone in this," she said gently. "We'll help you through it." I nodded, my chest tight. "Thank you," I said, the words small but heavy. As I left the office, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. My marriage, my trust, my very sense of who I was, it had all been built on a foundation of lies. I walked back to my car in a daze, the morning sun too bright, the air too thin. I wondered how many of the moments I'd cherished, birthdays, anniversaries, quiet nights at home, had been watched, recorded, analyzed. I wondered how many of my secrets weren't mine at all. I sat behind the wheel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked older, lines creasing the corners that hadn't been there before. I thought about Celeste, her smile, her laughter, the way she'd kissed me that morning like nothing had changed. I thought about the device in my head, the way it had stolen my life one heartbeat at a time. And I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. They searched our apartment that weekend, while Celeste was conveniently away at a biotech retreat in Napa Valley. The place felt cold and alien without her presence, though I couldn't tell if that was a comfort or a curse. Detective Lynn and her partner, a tall man named Darren Cordova with a tired smile, arrived with a small team of tech specialists. They wore gloves, carried laptops and small scanners that beeped as they passed over walls, bookshelves, and the corners of rooms I'd thought were mine. I sat on the edge of the couch, hands clenched, while they peeled back the layers of my life. The apartment was immaculate, Celeste's influence, always. Everything in its place, nothing out of order. But beneath that perfect surface, I could see the cracks now. The sterile smell of the kitchen, the faint residue of bleach that always lingered after she'd cleaned, the same smell that used to mean home now felt like the sin of a crime scene. Every object I touched felt tainted by doubt. Cordova crouched near the home office, eyes fixed on the tangle of cords behind the desk. "Mr. Reyes," he called, his voice tight. "Can you come here a sec?" I stood, my knees weak, and crossed the room. Cordova pointed to a small black device tucked discreetly into the power strip, a tiny rectangle with a blinking red light. "This is a data logger," he explained, his voice a careful blend of calm and caution. "Collects keystrokes, screen captures, basically everything you do on this computer." My stomach dropped. The laptop. I'd used it for everything: banking, emails, messages to my sister. Every word, every click, laid bare. I ran a hand through my hair, my breath catching in my throat. "Jesus," I whispered. "How long?" Cordova shook his head. "Hard to say, but given the encryption, at least a couple of years." Detective Lynn appeared behind us, her arms crossed. "Mr. Reyes," she said gently, "we also found an encrypted folder on the hard drive. It's large, really large. We're decrypting it now, but preliminary scans show it's full of audio files." I staggered back, the room spinning. "Audio files?" Lynn nodded. "Conversations. Phone calls. Probably even private discussions you had in this apartment." I leaned against the wall, feeling like I might throw up. Every memory felt suddenly poisoned. The fights I'd had with Celeste, the quiet moments when I'd called Raina to talk about my fears, even the late-night confessions to myself as I tried to figure out what was happening. All of it. Every word. A wave of shame and anger washed over me. "It gets worse," Cordova said, his voice low. He gestured for me to follow him to the corner of the room. There, he pulled up a series of emails on the decrypted screen. The sender's name jumped out at me like a slap. Hayden Krill. My mind raced. Celeste's friend, the oral surgeon. The one who'd put the device in my jaw. The emails were cold, clinical, with subject lines like surveillance initiation and contingency plan. I read the words through a haze of disbelief. "If he files for divorce, I want cause. He's too clever to slip up. I need insurance. Data streams are active. Audio feed is stable. We'll advise on next steps." My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor, the weight of those words pressing down like a lead blanket. Insurance. That's what I'd become. A liability she needed to manage, to control. I remembered every time she'd hugged me a little too tightly, every time she'd whispered sweet words in the dark. I'd thought it was love, but it was surveillance. Detective Lynn knelt beside me, her eyes steady. "I'm sorry, Malcolm," she said, and her voice was soft, so different from the cold professionalism I'd seen earlier. "This isn't just betrayal, it's criminal. We'll build a case." I nodded numbly, my mouth dry. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in on me. My eyes darted to the window, but all I could see was my own reflection, hollow-eyed, broken. She planned all of this," I whispered. "Even the surgery." Lynn's jaw tightened. "It looks that way," she said. "We've confirmed the emails came from her corporate account, and the timestamps line up with your dental procedure." I pressed a hand to my face, my palm cold against my skin. "She always said she did everything for us," I said, my voice trembling. "She said she worked so hard to give us a good life." Lynn sighed, her gaze steady. "Sometimes people use that as a shield," she said. "But the truth is, she didn't trust you. She wanted control." Cordova stood, his expression grim. "Mr. Reyes," he said, "with your permission, we'd like to take all the devices in this apartment for forensic analysis. Laptops, phones, tablets, anything that might contain data." I nodded. Take whatever you need, I said, my voice hollow. I just want the truth. They began to pack up my life, piece by piece, laptops, phones, even the smart speakers I'd thought were harmless. Each object felt like a betrayal now, a potential portal into the secret life my wife had been leading behind my back. I watched as they boxed everything, sealing away the fragments of my home. Lynn turned to me one last time, her eyes kind but resolute. We're going to help you, Malcolm, she said. This is a big case. There will be interviews, statements, maybe even a trial. But we'll be here. You're not alone. I nodded, a tear sliding down my cheek before I could stop it. I wiped it away quickly, hating the weakness it revealed. But Lynn didn't judge me. She just patted my shoulder and gave me a small, reassuring smile. After they left, I sat alone in the empty apartment, the silence pressing down on me. The furniture felt foreign, every object a relic of a life I wasn't sure I'd ever really lived. I thought about the emails, if he files for divorce, I want cause, and the way she'd smiled at me just days ago, like nothing was wrong. I thought about the way she'd made me feel like I was the one who needed her. I closed my eyes and let the ache behind them wash over me. I was done hiding from it. I was done being afraid. Because now, even though everything had fallen apart, I could see the truth. And as painful as that was, it was also a kind of freedom. For the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood. And that knowledge, cold and sharp, would become my weapon. I was ready to fight back. And this time, I wouldn't let her win. Celeste was arrested at the airport returning from her so-called conference. I saw the footage the police had captured from the terminal security cameras. Her calm, composed as always, wheeling her silver carry-on with that air of elegance she'd mastered over the years. She looked like any other business traveler, the polished wife I'd once believed in. Even when the officers approached, badge flashes and all, she didn't flinch. She just paused, turned, and raised an eyebrow as if they were offering her a courtesy ride home. That was Celeste to the core, unshakable in the face of accusation. Detective Lynn called me the morning after, her voice measured, almost gentle. Mr. Reyes, she began, we have her in custody. She didn't resist. Actually, she seemed prepared. The words hung there like smoke, filling the space between us. Prepared. That single word made my skin crawl. Prepared for what? To talk her way out of it? To spin the betrayal as a misunderstanding? I could already imagine her soft, measured tone, the way she'd tuck a strand of hair behind her ear and tilt her head, eyes wide and innocent. It was the same look she'd used on me for years, deflecting every hard question with a perfect performance. They've started questioning her, Lynn continued. She's admitted to orchestrating the implant procedure. My breath caught in my chest. I'd known it, but hearing it out loud from Lynn made it real. She claimed she was afraid you'd leave her, that you were cheating on her, and that she needed to protect herself. Lynn's voice faltered for a moment, as if the words tasted bitter in her mouth. She said she was collecting evidence. Evidence? I wanted to laugh, but my throat was too tight. Evidence of what? That I'd been the supportive husband who'd carried her stress like a second skin? That I'd given up my own career to make room for her ambitions? That I'd sat at home in the dark, waiting for her to come home from her so-called biotech crusades? She'd always painted herself as the victim, even when she was the one holding the knife. She also admitted to using Dr. Krill as a conduit, Lynn continued. We have enough to charge him with conspiracy and medical tampering. His license is already under review. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my knees weak. She's ruined everything, I whispered. Lynn was silent for a moment. I'm sorry, Malcolm, she said. I know this isn't just a crime, it's your life. I nodded even though she couldn't see me, my throat too tight for words. I thought about all the nights I'd spent doubting myself, the way Celeste had turned every question around, made me feel like I was the one with the problem. The gaslighting, the subtle digs, you're too sensitive, you overthink everything. Now I saw it all for what it was, a calculated strategy to keep me off balance while she wrapped her web tighter around me. I went to the police station that afternoon to sign the final statement, my hands trembling as I gripped the pen. Lynn met me at the entrance, her eyes steady but tired. She led me down a hallway lined with frosted glass, past doors that hummed with the quiet buzz of printers and murmured conversations. The interview room was small, the table scuffed and the chairs too hard. She placed a folder in front of me, the pages inside thick with legal language and medical reports, evidence of everything I'd lived through. Mr. Reyes, she said, her voice careful. You'll be pressing charges for unlawful surveillance, medical tampering, and emotional abuse. Are you certain you want to proceed? I looked at her, the weight of the past 3 years pressing down on me. I remembered the headaches that had stolen my sleep, the way my own home had felt like a prison, the nights I'd stared at the ceiling wondering what I'd done to deserve the cold distance in my own marriage. Yes, I said, my voice firm. I need to do this. She nodded and slid the folder toward me. I signed each page, my signature shaky at first, then stronger. Each stroke of the pen felt like a release, like I was finally taking back something Celeste had stolen from me. When it was done, Lynn offered me a small, sad smile. This isn't the end, she said, but it's a beginning. I left the station with the folder tucked under my arm, the sun glaring too bright in the sky. I wanted to hide, to crawl back into the shadows of the life I'd known, but I couldn't. Celeste's company dropped her almost immediately, press releases filled with careful language about misconduct and breach of trust. Her medical licenses were suspended pending the investigation. The same board that had once lauded her brilliance now treated her like a contagion. Friends called, some to offer sympathy, some to ask for the story, some to pretend they'd always known she was unstable. I ignored most of them. I didn't owe anyone my pain. I owed it to myself to heal. Days blurred into weeks. I stayed in the apartment at first, though every corner felt haunted. Her scent lingered on the pillows, her laughter trapped in the walls like an echo I couldn't silence. I boxed up her things, neatly labeled and stored in the guest room. I didn't have the strength to throw them out, but I couldn't let them sit in the spaces we'd shared. Every time the headaches threatened to return, I reminded myself, she's gone. She can't hurt you anymore. I met with Lynn one last time at the courthouse. She handed me the final case file, her eyes warm but guarded. She's facing serious time, she said. Her lawyer's trying to negotiate a deal, but the evidence is overwhelming. I nodded. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said. I just want my life back. Lynn smiled, a small, tired curve of her lips. I know, she said. That's why you're going to be okay. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I'd spent years living in the shadows of Celeste's ambition, believing I was the one who needed to change. But now I saw the truth. Her mistrust had become an obsession, her love a cage. And I had finally broken free. I walked out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on my face for the first time in what felt like forever. The world hadn't changed, but I had. And no matter what happened next, I knew I would never let myself be trapped in the darkness of her secrets again. I was done living for her. It was time to start living for me. I went in for surgery 2 days later. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, a smell that clung to my clothes long after I left. Dr. Suresh met me with a reassuring smile, his eyes kind but guarded, like he'd seen too many broken lives trying to stitch themselves back together. Mr. Reyes, he said, his voice low, we're going to take care of this. I nodded, my heart a hammer in my chest. Let's do it, I said, my voice shaking. The surgery was supposed to be simple. A small incision near my jaw, careful hands removing the device that had been living in my head like a parasite. I tried not to think about it as they wheeled me into the operating room. The lights above me blurred, turning into bright halos that made me squint. I wondered if Celeste had ever imagined this moment. Me on a table, my head open, every secret she tried to bury finally pulled into the light. When I woke up, the world felt quiet in a way I hadn't known in years. The ache behind my eyes was gone. The buzzing that had lived under my skin vanished. I touched the bandage near my jaw, half expecting to feel some phantom vibration. But there was nothing, just the beat of my own heart. Dr. Suresh stood by my bed, his expression calm. It's out, he said. We got it all. You'll heal fine. I nodded, my voice a whisper. Thank you. The detectives came by later to collect the device, sealed in a small plastic bag. It looked harmless, like a piece of cheap tech you'd toss into a junk drawer. But I knew better. It had stolen my privacy, my trust, my peace of mind. As they left, I felt something inside me shift, a sense of finality that tasted like freedom. Pressing charges felt less like revenge now and more like closure. Celeste's company severed ties with her. Her licenses were revoked. She was no longer the woman with all the answers, no longer the scientist everyone admired. She was just another person who'd gone too far and lost everything. And me? I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a clean start. 3 months later, I found myself sitting on the porch of a small cabin I'd rented near Lake Evershade, coffee in hand, watching the early morning mist roll off the water like a slow exhale. The quiet was something I hadn't known I needed. No buzzing in my head, no suspicious glances from across the dinner table. Just me, the trees, and the rhythmic chirping of unseen birds. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I let it ring. Raina had been checking in almost daily, worried I'd collapse under the weight of everything that had happened. She'd cried the first time I told her the whole story. Celeste, the device, the betrayal that had seeped into every corner of my life like rot. I always knew she was too perfect, she'd said. Too put together. She wasn't wrong. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness, the heat. It felt good to taste something real. I'd spent too many years swallowing the sweet poison of Celeste's carefully curated life. The designer dinners. The fake smiles at company parties. The way she'd always known just the right thing to say to keep me off balance. Now, there was no one here to correct me, no one to smirk or roll their eyes. Just me. I'd started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My easel sat near the window, canvas half finished. The strokes were rough, uneven, but honest. Each color bled into the next like the emotions I'd kept locked away for too long. Sometimes I'd look at the canvas and think, this is what freedom feels like. A knock at the door broke the silence. I set my coffee down and opened it to find the postman with a small package. No return address. My heart lurched, memories of Celeste's secrets flashing through my mind. But when I opened it, I found a note from Dr. Suresh, wishing me well and enclosing a copy of my final medical report. Clean, it read. No trace left. No trace left. The words felt like a promise I'd been waiting for. I stood there for a moment, the lake stretching out before me, the world open and wide. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And though the past would always be part of me, the lessons, the scars, it didn't own me anymore. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't afraid of the silence. I wasn't afraid of my own company. I wasn't afraid of who I might become. The quiet, I realized, wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, of healing, of me. Celeste received a 2-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 14 months. When I got the news, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. There was no sense of triumph, no cinematic moment of revenge. Just a numb sort of relief that she was finally where she belonged. I'd spent so long imagining that moment, her in handcuffs, her perfect hair out of place, her eyes wide with disbelief, but reality was quieter. She'd confessed. She'd signed the papers. Her lawyer negotiated the best deal he could, but the evidence was too strong. The woman who'd once held my life in her hands had been reduced to an inmate number on a screen. Dr. Krill's license was permanently revoked. His name had once sounded so harmless, even friendly. Now it sent a chill down my spine. He'd been complicit in my surveillance, a willing participant in Celeste's scheme. A man I'd met in his office, all smiles and small talk, had turned out to be the surgeon of my betrayal. His voice still haunted me in the quiet moments, especially when I thought about the casual way he joked during the procedure. It'll be over before you know it. It had been, but the aftermath had lasted far longer. I stood in the middle of the apartment one last time, the place where I'd lived and been watched. Every corner seemed to hold a memory of her, a whisper of the woman I'd thought she was. The kitchen where we'd cooked together, her laughter filling the air. The living room where we'd curled up on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder, telling me about her day. The bedroom where I'd lain awake wondering why the woman next to me felt like a stranger. It was all there, layered like dust I couldn't wipe away. I packed slowly, folding clothes with a care that felt absurd. Even now, I couldn't quite rid myself of the instinct to keep things neat, to leave no trace of myself behind. It had always been that way. Celeste liked things tidy, controlled. I'd adapted to her rhythm without even realizing it. But now, as I zipped the last suitcase, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't leaving for her this time. I was leaving for me. I moved into a small townhouse across town. It was nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard overgrown with weeds, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a pizza box and a beer, staring at the blank walls and feeling the emptiness wrap around me like a blanket. It should have been lonely, but it wasn't. It was a different kind of quiet, one that didn't feel like a trap. I started working freelance accounting gigs again, rebuilding the career I'd left behind. Numbers felt safe, predictable. They didn't lie. They didn't smile while planning your downfall. The clients were small businesses, startups that needed help navigating the mess of taxes and regulations. I found a rhythm, a purpose. Every time I signed a contract, I felt a piece of myself come back. At night, I still woke up sometimes, my hand drifting to my jaw, half expecting to feel that device, to hear its silent hum in my skull. But there was nothing there, just skin and bone and a faint scar. I'd touch it, remind myself that it was gone, and let the darkness take me back. The nightmares were rare now, but when they came, they were vivid. Celeste's eyes, cold and calculating. Dr. Krill's hands, steady as he guided the scalpel. The sense that I was trapped in a life I couldn't escape. But every time I woke, I told myself the same thing. You're free. You're safe. She can't touch you anymore. One morning, I painted a sunrise on a blank canvas, rough strokes, too bright at first, but then softer as the colors bled together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. When I stepped back, I realized I'd been painting something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. My sister Raina came to visit one weekend. She walked through the house with cautious steps, as if testing the air. She smiled at the plants I'd started keeping near the window, the stack of books on the coffee table. "You're living again," she said, her voice warm. "Trying," I replied. She hugged me tightly. "You've come so far," she whispered. "Don't let her keep you from the life you deserve." I nodded, her words sinking into me like sunlight on a cold day. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself thinking about Celeste. Not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the one I'd loved. The one who'd made me laugh, who'd kissed my forehead when I was sick, who'd planned vacations I'd never taken. I wondered if she'd been real, or if she'd always been a mask. I'd probably never know. But I learned something important. Love, real love, doesn't watch you. It doesn't record your secrets or turn your life into a file to be studied. It trusts. It lets you breathe. And it certainly doesn't leave scars you have to dig out of your own skull. I couldn't erase the past, but I could choose how to carry it. And as I stood on my small porch, watching the sun rise over my new street, I realized I wasn't broken anymore. Just different. Stronger. Wiser. And most importantly, I was finally free.